should be. Is this one? Oh, try that one.
Check, check. Yeah, you know, this is really, 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 really uncomfortable to actually be sitting inside of here.
Just to be sat, just not fighting.
Uncomfortable, yeah.
I mean, as a man with a fighter's instinct, because how long have you been fighting for, sir? When did you first start to fight and train?
From what I've been told, it's about when I was 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old. I've been fighting my whole life.
Yeah. So yeah, as a natural fighter, it's probably, if we'd have said, we want you to fight, say, Aaron, right there, you'd have been happy with that. But sitting with a mic is a different set of nerves, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
So, welcome. I feel I should point out to everyone, in case, I think they're just in awe, it's only bloody Ken Shamrock! Welcome to the For Love of Wrestling in Manchester. How's it been for you?
It's good, man. It only took me a day and a half to get here, and after that, it's been great.
They didn't do you a direct flight, for shame, for shame. So welcome along, and the thing I always think about with you is that much like Gangrel earlier, who is iconic as yourself, it's easy to forget that you were only sort of in WWF for like a year and a half, all said and done, but the impact you made was huge. What was it like to go there to begin with?
Well, first of all, you know, I'm coming from the world of MMA where, you know, I'm in there and I'm hurting people, enjoying it, having fun. And then all of a sudden I get into pro wrestling and, you know, when you get in there, you start thinking, oh, I'm going to go in here and, you know, roll over and have some fun. And then you get in there and you start taking bumps day after day after day. And then about 6 months in, you're going, damn, I feel a lot worse than I ever did fighting.
How many, so to put into perspective, as a professional fighter, how many days a year or how many fights would you have in a year normally?
Well, as a pro fighter?
As an MMA fighter,
man, you know, it's a lot different now because now they fight like twice a year if they're lucky, right? Yeah. I was fighting, sometimes I would fight 5 times in 1 month because you'd do tournaments, so you'd fight 3 times in one night. I'd go to Japan and I'd fight in another tournament there. So it was a little bit different early on. Within a month, I probably at one time fought about 12 times. But in the early days, it was there was really no regulation, so you could really just travel around the United States and fight in whatever tournaments you wanted to.
Anywhere you wanted. Do we have any fans of the UFC back from when it started?
Let's hear
in the
ya.
90s? Who are the UFC fans of today? Give me a cheer. Let's hear MMA guys. Yeah. So, because now it's so different to what it was when it started. It was legitimately, you could be fighting anyone, couldn't you? What was that like?
Yeah, and it was, I remember going into my first UFC where it's like, they would have all the fighters listed, right? So you would go down and you look at it and there was no bracket. Like, you're like, well, yeah, well, who's fighting who? So like an hour, like literally the day of the actual fight is when they really put the first bracket out where you knew who you were fighting. And even after that bracket was set, if somebody got hurt in the fight and you went to the next round and the guy in the other bracket had fought and he got hurt and he couldn't continue in, they would bring in an alternate who hadn't fought yet. So you're fighting somebody you don't know and he's fresh.
Well, it's a wild, wild west. Do you remember, I mean, because your background obviously sort of the sort of wrestling, so please, for the sake of my knowledge, everyone, what is your fighting background, sir? What are your martial arts styles?
Well, I guess old school, they call it catch wrestling, which is a form of actual wrestling and submissions mixed together. But it's really, now, at least in a concept, it's more like a shoot fighting because you're also kickboxing, you're wrestling, and you're doing submission holds.
Yeah, so it's very much you have to have a rounded game now as a fighter. But back then it was, you would have one striker and a grappler. When you were in those early sort of tournaments, who was the person you ended up fighting that was the most, who were the ones that were so different from you? You just thought, you're such a different style of fighter. And what was it like to fight them?
Well, and I'm going back in the day, early days when I fought, there's really, and people would always ask me this question, who was the toughest guy you ever fought, or who was the most difficult, or who challenged you the most? And then really, it's really about every single one of them because I was the champion early on. I established myself as the best fighter, myself and Hoist. And so everybody that you fought was either one who won a tournament, who had qualified to fight you. So I was fighting the best guys in the world every single time I stepped into the cage. So every single one of them possessed different things. Like, for instance, Hoist was sneaky, but I wasn't afraid of him. I didn't think he could hurt me. Whereas guys like Don Fry or Dan Severn or Mark Coleman, who's just big and strong, those guys can end your life, right? So it was just a different type of skill sets. Hoist was one of the best to ever do it, but you didn't fear him like you did some of those other big, strong guys.
Every day was a school day, wasn't it? Fantastic. So we'll jump forward to 1997 because UFC was just starting to become a thing, and you popped up in WWF, right. and what a way to debut, because obviously, any fans of Steve Austin and Bret Hart from WrestleMania 97?
Yeah.
I mean,
give it up.
Safe to say, one of the best matches in WrestleMania of all time. It's like that.
Ever.
And almost to the point that people weirdly almost forget that you were there.
Right.
But that was your debut. Referee, what was that like?
Yeah, it was interesting because I was coming from the world of mixed martial arts. I had established myself. I was looking for something more, something different. And of course, I got into wrestling. Vince wanted to bring me in. And the one thing that was really beat into my head by Bret Hart was like, you're a mixed martial arts fighter. Don't come here and be a pro wrestler. Do what you do in the ring. And this is before I actually did my match, and I was working out with those guys in Calgary. They approached me about doing the match, and it was against Stone Cold. And I was like, I've never really actually been on that side of it, or I'm actually watching two people fight inside of there. But yeah, let's try it. But again, me personally, I just didn't know whether or not I could do it. And so, but I did it because they asked me to do it. So getting in there when that thing actually started, it was probably 5 or 10 minutes into the match, and it was like I literally had no clue about what kind of thing I was. I just figured these guys were beating each other up, and I was refereeing an MMA match because it looked so real to me. Yeah. That he was actually bleeding, and Bret was panting, and they were beating on each other, and those punches were landing, and I was in there refereeing. As far as I was concerned, I was refereeing a real fight.
I mean, and because it was submission rules, you didn't have to keep jumping in and doing counts and stuff, so you got to stay out of that. So that was your first introduction. You were in the middle of that noise as well. It must have been, because I'm guessing to that point, MMA was still taking place in sort of smaller venues. What was it like to be in the middle of that WrestleMania crowd?
Yeah, it's a rush. Again, in MMA, when I first felt it when I was in Japan, I was fighting over in Pancras, I got my first experience in front of 17,000 people, and they were chanting my name. I say this over and over, it was like a drug. It's something that I think when you feel the fans and you hear them screaming your name and chanting, whether it's booing or whether they're chanting, either way, man, it's this rush that you feel like, wow. I mean, you chase it. I chased it my whole career, man. It was important to me.
It's a high. I mean, you could have chanted his name at that point. That would have been too late, not sincere. We'll move on. Never ask for it. That's on me. So from there, your first sort of official WWF match was with Vader at the Cold Day in Hell, and that was quite physical. What was what was the stories of that?
Well, Vader had already done some things himself within the MMA world, and he was known as being a big, strong, very good athlete, and that he was tough. And so I think Vince put him together with me on purpose so that I could get an actual feel on how this was going. And so when I went in there, and it was like, I thought the match was good. I mean, it really was, and everybody else did too. But as far as a standard for a pro wrestling match, and be able to work with everyone, it was a couple notches high for being too aggressive. But it gave me an understanding of where I needed to be as far as being able to put on a great match and be able to work with anyone. So I felt like when I had that match, it was one of the matches that I think that really helped me understand where I needed to be able to have a career in pro wrestling.
Oh, without a doubt. Now, let me just see how we're doing. We are in no rush, but I believe it might be time to have because I have not found someone to do the roving mic, so I'm going to do that. If you would mind staying in your seat, I will go and do the running around. Oh, no, wait. We have Aaron who's going to take over those duties. So I'll give you this. And we'll get some questions. So, who has a question for Mr. Ken Shamrock? One over there.
Hello.
Hey.
I actually met you in Orlando. We had a good chat about technology and the future of technology and stuff. I'm going to ask a really kind of, probably a question you've answered 1,000 times. If you actually had a kind of one-on-one UFC style fight with Steve Blackman, would you back yourself, or do you think he'd kind of
I didn't hear what.
crescent kick you in the head?
So, what was your name, mate?
Russell.
Russell. So Russell has set up the ultimate fight. He said if it was an MMA fight between yourself and Steve Blackman, would you bet on yourself to win?
Well, first of all, Steve Blackman would bet on me.
I'd bet on you too.
Yeah, well, listen, the one thing about Steve's a great guy. I actually partnered with him while I was in the WWF for a while. We rode together. Really good guy. We actually had a chance to come in, and we rolled around a little bit before some of the matches that were going to go on that night. We got in and we rolled around a little bit. And, you know, just when you talk about, and again, this is knowledge for everyone, when you talk about a professional athlete, whether it be in pro wrestling, whether it be in soccer or basketball, or what I do, when you get somebody that has not done that, it's a whole different ball game when you talk about skill sets and levels.
No, thank you very much.
You
I
bet.
appreciate it.
And Steve Blackman, who doesn't seem to age, does he?
Right.
It's insane. Any other questions? A gentleman over there. You want to make your way down? No rush.
So, obviously, back in the day when UFC first started, you had the Lion's Den, which was your gym, and there was a lot of rumours that the Lion's Den was a very difficult gym to get into because of the strength conditioning routine and everything around that. As an amateur MMA fighter myself, I know that the strength conditioning now is a lot more scientific based. What sort of stuff did you do back then for the strength conditioning to make it so tough? And how would you put it against today's scientific based strength conditioning for MMA?
Yeah, the way that it was set up, the Lions Den tryouts, when guys would come and they wanted to try out, it was set up for them to fail. It was legitimately the purpose to fail. And the only reason why we were doing that was because we needed to know whether or not they would continue to keep going against all impossible odds. Because if I can find that kind of mentality where someone keeps getting up and keeps going, no matter whether they fall, they lose the circulation in their legs, or they're so tired they can't breathe, but they keep getting up and they keep going. And we do 8-hour tryouts where guys literally just had nothing left, but they had to keep getting up. And there was a guy in there just beating them up and keep coming at them after they had done all of this work. And the reason being is because when you have somebody that has that kind of willpower, that will just keep getting up no matter how bad they feel and no matter how tired they are, you can teach them to be a great fighter.
Right. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
That's a great question. Now, you brought up two words that I'd like to revisit. Lion's Den. Because in my mind, that immediately takes me to a series of matches you had in '97 with the magnificent Owen Hart.
Right.
What a man. And also, very different at the time because you had the dungeon match, then you had the Lion's Den match at SummerSlam, both which were incredible. What was it like to work with Owen, and any memories of those matches?
Yeah, it was difficult. Like in the dungeon, the Iron Circle in the cars where they're circled under the garage, you know, the Lion's Den match. Every one of these matches that I had inside of these were ones that you couldn't do traditional wrestling. There was no ropes to bounce off. There was no ropes to climb up. There was no going out of the ring. There was none of that. So it was very strategically put together to be able to do more like a street fight. And to be able to work with Blackman and Owen and some of them in those matches. And it was just, it was a thrill. And to be able to do it, you know, in those kinds of places where it was not the norm was awesome. It was and they were great. And as far as I was concerned, they were They were matches that you don't get to see every day.
And you did so much in that cage as well. Because I remember back in the day when I read the magazines, it was like, it's going to be a bit limited. But the things that you and Owen managed to do inside that cage was phenomenal.
Yeah, Owen has some tremendous athletic ability, you know, and some of the things that we were doing in there, backflips off the cage and all that stuff. Owen was a tremendous opponent because he had that natural athletic ability.
What a man. Owen Hart, my friends. For him.
Yeah.
We have a question over here, sir.
Hey, Ken. So apart from yourself or Steve Blackman, who was legitimately the toughest guy backstage?
Ooh, see, and that's the thing, you never really know. Yeah, you just don't know because everyone in backstage all got along with one another to a point. Obviously, there were character, conflicts, but no one ever really got into it. You know, everybody was pretty professional. So, I hear people say all the time, and they see somebody in there, they go, "Oh, that guy be a great MMA fighter." But you never know until someone actually does it, and then you know. Because again, you see even in the NFL where they got combines going on and they're breaking athletes down and they're doing their 40s and their high jumps and their sprints and explosiveness. They've got all of these technical things where they're breaking down all these players and they still get it wrong. They still get guys that go in there and just fall through the cracks. So you imagine even in wrestling when there's not all that stuff where somebody thinks they're tough, you don't know until you actually put them to the test. That's why I hear people say all the time, well, you think you could take so-and-so? I'm looking at them going, did so-and-so ever fight? Because if he did, then we might be able to judge it.
That's a very, very modest way of saying that nobody ever effed with you backstage, sir. That's
no,
fantastic.
And again, it wasn't like people were running around afraid of me or anything. I mean, it was just a lot of respect for one another to go out and do our jobs.
Yeah, and you did. You brought it. It's because a lot of folk, I think it says a lot. You have to be quite secure in yourself to go into wrestling and adapt rather than make them do your thing, and you adapted.
Well, the whole point of entertaining the fans and jumping inside there and doing your job is that when you do that, you want to be the best at it. You don't want to go in there and do things that make the match not right. And the only way that happens is if all three of you work together, and like the referee and the two guys in there, you have to work together to make that match what you want it to be.
Absolutely fantastic. Have we got these rotating chairs are brilliant, aren't they?
On the road to SummerSlam, you did some promotional training in Stu Hart's dungeon, which is legendary in the history of wrestling. And I was just wondering, in all the training that you've done for mixed martial arts and wrestling, like where that kind of rated in intensity, and do you have any experiences that you could tell us about in the dungeon?
Yeah, not so much about the actual training part, but it was the actual, I went up and it was Stu Hart's birthday. So they kind of brought me in as a surprise guest because he was, big onto the fighting and the submissions and stuff. And so when I first met him, I went to shake his hand and he put me on my knees. He threw me in his arm submission and I was like, I just met this guy, right? He's like 80 years old or something and he's like making me squeal. I'm like, okay, I give up. Happy birthday.
That was a true Stu Hart story. Over the other side. See, it's good for your step count. Right there.
Who's won a question?
Here we are.
Hello again, Ken.
Hey.
Sorry, I keep forgetting. All right. I was meaning to tell you before when we was at the meet and greet. Apparently, I've forgotten that you was also trained by Minoru Suzuki, weren't you?
Sorry, what was that?
You was trained by Minoru Suzuki.
Training with Suzuki?
Yeah.
Minoru Suzuki.
Yeah.
Is that right?
What was that like, getting your ass kicked for all those minutes? And not in a tutorial way at all.
Especially when I first went into, it was actually UWF and then of course into Pancras. I went in there and those guys were already at a level that I wasn't at yet. And so I went in there and I got just tortured and tooled. But the one thing is that when I first felt the heel hook, and the arm bars and all the submissions like that, and my mind was like, this is what I want to do. I saw Suzuki and Funaki fight, and I literally looked at that match and said, that's what I want to do. And this is before I got into wrestling. And from that time on, I got the chance to go to Japan. I had my first match. I won my first match. And I started staying over to Japan. I'd fly out 1 month. I would train there a month. I would do a fight. Then I would fly home for a month. I'd go back out the next month. I would fight. I would stay in Japan for a month. Because it was the only place that I could literally learn how to do that. Because here in the States, UFC or any of that stuff hadn't been born yet. There was no such thing as boxing and wrestling mixed together. So I had to stay over there to do that. But that was the experience I had, was like being able to go and have to train with guys like that just literally beat the tar out of me, because I knew that there was some day that I would do it to them. And I trained my butt off, and it came to a point where I had to fight Funaki and I had to fight Suzuki, and I was lucky enough to be able to win.
Yeah, absolutely covered it. We got a question there, I believe.
Hello, Mr. Shamrock. If you could fight now in either the AEW or the WWE or any of them, who would you like to fight?
Oh, well, there's a couple of them. Obviously, Brock Lesnar comes to mind.
Yes.
Then there's Bill Goldberg.
Yes.
And then, of course, you know, the one that I think would be one of the greatest matches we could ever put on would be Kurt Angle and Ken Shamrock.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What about the likes of AEW, like John Moxley and that?
Sorry?
What about the AEW and John Moxley and all them?
Oh, man. If I could get into a time machine and be 20 years younger, I'd fight them all.
Oh, perfect stuff. Because speaking of wrestlers at the moment, there's been this guy who recently has kind of decided to come back and do a bit more of that wrestling stuff. And you were such a huge part, I think, of making him early in his career. You were the first person I thought, your matches with The Rock in 1997 and 98 for the Intercontinental Championship, absolutely incredible. What was it like to work with The Rock then, and did you have any idea what was coming for him?
Well, I tell you, The Rock was a tremendous individual. I mean, not only in the ring was he just unbelievable, but outside the ring, man, he's a good guy. It's just somebody that, you know, you could talk to, and that if he tells you something, you know he's going to do it. So I built a great relationship with him as we were working through our program. Again, I was just coming in from this world of mixed martial arts. He was just coming in, starting to make his climb. Nobody really understood the talent level that he had yet until they gave him the mic. And that was when we were doing our programs. And he started cutting promos. And when he started cutting promos, forget about it. I mean, like, he just shot up. And I was fortunate enough to be there to watch that happen and be able to put on some great matches with him. And to this day, man, I'm just so proud of him, man, for what he's been able to do.
He's done all right. And I feel, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you are the last person to tap The Rock out.
Right. Yeah, I've had him screaming a couple times. But, you know, that's only because of the chair shot. I had to make him hurt.
That one. That's a gift that keeps on giving, isn't it? I think we're sort of coming to the end of our time together. I would just like to mention something. So later on, we started by talking about a guest referee. Tonight, at the after party, you are in a similar role. You will be the ringside enforcer, laying down the law for the Future Shock Championship match between our champion Joe Blazer and the challenger Deadly Damon Lee. He calls himself Deadly. This is someone, and he has said that he's willing to do whatever he has to do to get that championship back, even if it means breaking the rules. Do you have anything to say to Damon Lee before tonight?
Yeah, snap, crackle, and pop. Be careful.
Oh, fantastic. Well, do you have anything to say to the fine folk of For the Love of Wrestling tonight before we wrap up?
Yes, I just want to say, man, it's been a journey. I've enjoyed so much of the travel with the MMA, getting into wrestling, and I just want to say thank you to all of you fans. You guys have been wonderful, man, so thank you, and God bless you.
For the Love of Wrestling, let's hear your appreciation for the world.